We've seen a lot of different versions of the Quakes in this early era under new head coach Bruce Arena. This last one against Charlotte FC on the road was without a doubt the worst version of the team we've seen this season. It was a matchup between two teams missing a number of key players, but ultimately Arena's questionable tactics allowed for a direct and decisive 4-1 win for Charlotte FC. My name is Kevin, I'm joined by Luis, and together we're the Quakesaholics. In this video, we'll be breaking down this disastrous performance. So Luis, get us started with the first three words that come to mind when reflecting on this game.
My three words are reckless, humiliating, and Almeida-esque. Probably one of the worst ways you can have your performance be described.
For my three words, I actually went with the phrase shaking my head, because I'm just completely baffled at what we saw in this game. It was terrible all around. A really big talking point going into the game, especially if you watched our match preview, was that there was a lot of key players missing. So on the Quake side, Hernan just had a shoulder surgery, so he'll be out for like 3 to 4 months. Benji Kanovich has been injured all season. Joseph Martinez has been on national team duty with Venezuela. Nico is also out with the U.S. youth national team. And then it was reported on the day of the match that Vitor Costa also picked up an injury. And then on the Charlotte side, it was an almost equal amount. Abada had a call-up to Israel, and then Ajiamang and Reem were both with the U.S. men's national team. And all of those are key figures for Charlotte. Given all that context, what did you make of the 11 that we actually did roll out with? What did you like? What didn't you like?
I think the 11 was actually more or less what we wanted and what we would have expected given the players available. Interestingly, this was the first game of the season that Bolero was out, but I think Marc-Anthony Kaye, since the beginning of the season, every time he's come on, he's looked good, he's looked sharp. So in terms of the starting 11, I feel like it was okay, at least before going into the game, but afterward, after seeing what we saw, obviously hindsight is 2020, I do think that the San Jose Earthquakes could have approached this game a lot better. And I don't know, maybe it's hindsight talking, but I think one thing that I did kind of think about afterwards was the fact that we were missing obviously a lot of firepower up top, which is what gave Buddha and Judd starts. Buddha might have started even when everyone else is fit, but definitely Judd is not a player we've seen too often this season. And I think there's arguments to be made that maybe we could have done a back five, but yeah. Talk more about that later into the video.
I overall do agree with what you're saying. I do think that the 4-3 was the preference. The players that we selected in those positions were for the most part the best players. Like you said, Bo could have been a shout to make it in the 11. I think where we got it wrong was tactically how those players were used. Offensively, there were some good performances, notably from Chicho Arango. I do think this was probably his best game of the season. That probably sounds very surprising, a 4-1 loss, but in terms of like chances created, this was definitely a better one for him. But when the defense plays so poorly, nothing that happens up top seems to really matter, right? So let's dive into these goals. I know you have a lot of talking points, so I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, and the reason why I said Almeida-esque, I know, very fighting words for sure, but because I think that we saw a lot of man marking this game, something that I think, is very a risky thing to do, especially against a team that's good in transition. If you were around during COVID, a lot of Quakes fans might remember when Sounders put 7 against us, and a big part of that was because Sounders were a really good transition side and the man marking just didn't hold up. If you break down these goals, right, in the first goal you have Charlotte's left back Doumbia, who's being marked by Espinoza very tightly, and Doumbia makes a 1-2 with Wilfred Zaha, who checks back. And then Doumbia goes onto a run, drives at our midfield, and then you have Marc-Anthony Kaye, who maybe under different circumstances and given different instructions would probably have gone and stepped up to him. And in fact, you see him trying. You see him going to step up and then pulling out. Why does he pull out? Because the person that he's responsible for marking in the man-on-man setup makes a run on their left wing. So he just kind of steps up, hesitating, doesn't do anything, and then goes to follow his man that he should have been marking. And by that point, it's way too late. The ball gets played into their number 10, who also forces Romney way up too high because it's his man that he's meant to be on. And it's a quick counterattack down the wing, cut back, and it's a goal. And it's 1-0. The second goal, unlucky from Romney. He probably should have played it back to Danielle, but makes sense. All the players are up the field, so you want to kick it up the field. It gets intercepted or whatever, 2-0. And the third goal, again, because of the man marking, you have Romney stepping up into the midfield, going to their number 10. And you have Marc-Anthony Kaye, who has to basically play as a center back temporarily because the player that he's marking is making him go over there. And it's just these players don't know what they're doing there. They're not comfortable there. So, but they're putting these situations because they're instructed to put pressure on specific players. And if those specific players go into, into areas that they're not comfortable with, they just have to follow them because those are the instructions that they've been given. But it doesn't work because the execution is just not going to be there. Is there an argument that maybe if you man mark or if you want to play up really high, that you can win the ball up high? Sure. But these players, we haven't really seen that this season. We've played with a back five, double pivot. We've, sat back. And it's just like too aggressive. It's just too much. And that's what you get. You get 4 goals. You get punched in the face with 4 goals. And in the 4th goal, similar. Bruno Wilson way too high up. And you have Jamar Ricketts who knows that he's beat by the Charlotte right winger. And he tries to step up for an offside trap. Doesn't work because, the guy that Romney is marking is, kind of far back. So he sets the line too far back. And it's an easy goal. Again, all their goals just felt easy for them. And this happened time and time again. Like, it doesn't work. And I think Bruce has to see it. It's an experiment. It went horribly wrong, and he has to adapt. He can't do this anymore. It's untenable. Yeah, it just remind me of Almeida. And that's honestly all I can say. And that should be enough reason to not want to try it again.
Ultimately, I feel like the theme that I was seeing is that our defensive line was just always pushed up so far up the field. And I think you're right that because of the man marking, they were just getting pulled up so high, and that just left so much space for Charlotte to just be able to get one man off of whoever was being marked by them and then just send a deep ball, very direct, almost very route one, if you want to call it that, and it's just very simple direct goals. So really frustrating to see. And what added to that frustration for me is that it didn't seem like there was an adequate tactical adjustment to this. It seemed very obvious what they were doing to us in the first half. And then we started the second half with essentially subbing on and playing 3 center backs, and everyone else was kind of like a like-for-like substitution throughout the rest of the game, but there was no tactical adjustment. It just felt like personnel adjustment, but with the same instructions. And it was encouraging to see Jack Scan finally get his first minutes of the season, but that's not really what we were. After the red card, it's already 4-1. At that point, the things that we do, it's kind of like you're just grasping for straws at that point. But that is one positive. How did you feel Bruce Arena did with tactically adjusting in this game?
As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, it makes sense that Marc-Anthony Kaye was awarded a start because he's played well. But at the same time, I just feel like Charlotte wanted to play this game at 100 miles an hour, and the Earthquakes wanted to play it at 120 miles per hour. And I think that it just didn't work. The execution was just not good. Maybe there's an argument to be made that the reason why you have such an aggressive defensive style is to win the ball up high. But if, again, like with the first goal, if one player gets beat, it just creates tons of space that Charlotte was exploiting time and time again. I think, honestly, in the first game and in the second game that we had, we were doing a really good job at slowing teams down because we had 5 in the back, we had 2 defensive midfielders, and we just clogged everything up. I don't understand why you go to Charlotte, a place that's a hostile atmosphere, and you want to do that. I think there's a good argument that maybe Bolero should have started, a player who likes to get on the ball, likes to hold the ball, get touches, make passes, and just slow the game down, and maybe even go to 5 in the back just to solidify the defense. And I don't know if Charlotte would have been happy with time on the ball. Like I said, they wanted to play this game fast. So yeah, I think that it was obviously didn't work, and Bruce didn't really do anything about it. Nothing really changed. I mean, at the end of the game, just kind of nothing was happening because the damage had already been done.
Coming off of these last 3 games that we've had of 3 losses, they're all 3 losses are different in the sense of like how we played. One was we dominated statistically. Another one was we just got beaten by a much better goalkeeper that just played the best game of his career. And then now this, which was just a complete tactical disaster, it doesn't instill a lot of confidence in a time where, as an organization, you already have so little confidence from the fans. And I'm speaking generally here. This isn't me saying like I'm giving up hope or anything like that. It's just that I empathize with a lot of people who are probably feeling like, oh, it's a new season, but it's the same Quakes. But there's still time, and I mean, our next game is against Sounders. Historically, at least in recent history, we've had their number. They've always struggled against us, even if they're playing at home. So there's at least that. And I do think that there are positives from this game. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I think Chicharito played a good game. In terms of expected goals, we actually were basically level with Charlotte. And I think a really big part of that was from Chicho. And the first clear chance of the game was actually the Quakes. I think it was in like the 5th or 6th minute or something like that, and Chicho just happened to miss. And you think about like, had those things gone our way, had that first goal been ours, it would have been a completely different game potentially. Maybe then after that is when the Quakes would actually switch tactically of playing more defensively, kind of like what we saw in Kansas City, because this team can defend. It just, something went wrong in this game. And I think, Luis, you're right that it was switching to more of like a man marking player, like just pressing up higher up the field. Whatever it was, it didn't work out, but there's still time to correct it, and I hope we correct it soon.
I think that there's time to correct things, and I think we've looked best in a back five, so why not just stick with that?
Yeah, you're right. There is an argument to go to back five, but I think the problem that we have is that we just don't have enough in the attack. And of course, with Joseph being back next week, that helps out a lot. But for this game specifically, like you think about playing five in the back, then who do we put up top?
I don't know. I feel like I think we looked really good on set pieces in Charlotte. That was the only time where I felt, well, that's not true. That's not the only time where I felt like we had danger, but definitely there was some nervy moments for Charlotte fans when we were on corner kicks. And I also think that game state is a big part of it. When you're down, you're just bleeding goals. It doesn't really matter what your attack looks like, I think. And also, given the personnel that we had with Rodriguez on the bench, there's bigger defensive names on this current squad than there are offensive names, and maybe you just kind of bank on the defense for that. That's one way of looking at it and adapting in that way. You're saying, okay, well, what do we have? We have a lot of good defenders, so let's make ourselves hard to break down. Will it make it a little bit harder to create goals? Yeah, but that's just the nature of this game, right? Like I just think that there's an argument for that game plan to have worked. To just, we're going to let Charlotte, we're going to frustrate them, and maybe we can get a goal somewhere. But instead, we wanted to go 100 miles an hour, and that's what you get. You get 4 goals in the face. So, yeah.
Playing something more like what Minnesota did to us. I see what you're saying. And yeah, I mean...
Yeah, pretty much. Exactly.
Yeah, and I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll start doing that against Seattle next week. Only time will tell. I think that's all I had for this game. Luis, did you have any final words?
No, just that. Yeah, hopefully against Seattle. That'll be at home, right? At home?
Yeah,
back
at
at
home.
PayPal?
Yep.
Yeah, so hopefully you'll be there. I'll be there. Thankfully, I'm on spring break, so it can't be the same. So, yeah. That's all for this week for me.
Yep. And so my last words, my departing words is 4 goals is greater than 1, but 2 MLS Cups is greater than 0. So we still have that over Charlotte. Next week, Seattle. We'll have a match preview later in the week. If you're interested, subscribe, and we'll catch you then. Thanks.